We're in the second part of a three-part message series called Unfolding. But I don't want to just review last week. I want to review the whole series before that and the whole big idea of what the whole series was called Origins that a few of you had participated in last month. And the big idea was this, is that our purpose, let me turn this thing on, our purpose is to partner with God to spread His goodness throughout the world. If you could get that more, at the heart level than just at the mind level, like, okay, our goodness, spread good. If you could just kind of memorize that, that'd be great. But if you could actually feel that at the heart level and say, like, that's what my purpose is, and actually take it personally and say, that's what my purpose is, to be a partner with God, to spread His goodness throughout the world. See, it's actually pretty incredible that we can be partners with God, an almighty, all-knowing, all-loving, and good God. It's pretty awesome we can be a partner with Him, right? And I'll tell you one thing, if that's possible, if it's possible to be a partner with God, I'll tell you one place that I don't want to be. I don't want to be on the bench. I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be in the game. I want to be a partner who is actually taking part, active part, in spreading that goodness. I don't want to be on the bench. And so we asked this question. We said, well, if we don't want to be on the bench, and I know you don't want to be on the bench either, we asked this question, we said, what kind of partner then is God looking for? If that's available, if a partnership with God is available, and we know that we don't all want to be sitting on the sidelines watching everyone else and God going and doing good things, we want to be part of that. And then, well, goodness, what kind of partner is God looking for? And then we looked at God's unfolding story, and we said, okay, there's some key partnerships here throughout Scripture, throughout the Bible. And these are like landmark stories where God comes down to take one person or a group of people and say, I want to partner with you on this next task. Okay, now I want to partner with you on this next task. Okay, now I want to partner with you on this next task. And there's just a couple of them. And we're looking at 4 of them in this series. And the last one was Abraham. This is really kind of the first new kind of partnership that God started. And we asked the question last week, okay, God partners with Abraham, but why did God partner with Abraham? And when Abraham heard God's voice for the first time saying, I want you to leave your father's house and go to a land I will show you, I bet Abraham was wondering, why do you want to partner with me? But we had to understand some of the stories that led up to that. You remember the story of Adam and Eve, and the story of Cain, and the story of Noah. That's what we looked at last time. And what we understood is that in each of those stories, they had failed to take responsibility. They had failed to take responsibility for themselves. They had failed to take responsibility for each other, for their relationships, and they had failed to take responsibility for the entire community that they lived in. Yes, even the whole world, they had failed to take responsibility. It's a key part of being a partner with God, is you're going to take responsibility. And so we said this, why did God partner with Abraham? Well, it's because Abraham took responsibility what others had failed to do. It's very simple. And from those stories, we drew out one point, one little principle, one little truth, and it was this. That if you want to be a partner with God, well, you can only be that kind of partner. You can only be the partner that God wants you to be when you reject what's easy and take responsibility. And in your life, you're going to have an opportunity to go one way that leads to personal comfort. You're going to have another option that leads to some personal fulfillment of being one of God's partners. You can only do that by rejecting the path that's easy and taking the path that leads to spreading God's goodness. And that's not easy. Well, tonight I want to tell you a story about this next big landmark partnership that God formed. And it's a little bit different this time because it's not a partnership with just an individual. It's not just like me and Camp making a partnership. We're going into business together, right? It's not just the two of us. It's actually God making a partnership with a group of people. It's a little bit different. It's less like a business and actually more like a marriage. But I'll get to that in a minute. What I'd like to do is pick up near the end of our story. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Numbers chapter 11. Numbers chapter 11. You remember this is the first few books of the Bible form what we call the Torah. It's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those 5. We're in the 4th book of the Torah. And it's kind of interesting. Okay, I'm going to sit down for this because it gets kind of crazy right from the beginning. God is angry. Okay, now when God's angry, everybody's got to pay attention a little bit. Everybody's got to sit up a little bit straighter. So I'm going to invite you to sit up a little bit straighter because God is angry. Why is He angry? Well, let's find out. Moses discovers that God's angry when he hears all of the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tent. They're wailing. Everybody's wailing. Anybody have a 2-year-old in your household? Okay, you probably haven't heard wailing in a while, but wailing is like crying on steroids. It's like crying times 100. Okay, and everybody's doing it. Now, to give you a picture, we've got maybe 100 people in here tonight, right? So if we were all wailing, it'd be kind of loud. But I want you to think about all of the people incoming, okay? All of the people incoming. And then I want you to multiply that by 4. And that's the number of people that are wailing. Okay? There's tons, everybody's wailing, everybody's crying. It says, the Lord became exceedingly angry. He's not just a little bit upset. He's really, really upset. And it says, and Moses was troubled. Okay, now this is like the understatement of the year. Okay, everybody's wailing. God is exceedingly angry, and Moses is actually deeply, deeply distressed. Okay, and he asks God about this. He says, he asks the Lord, why have you brought this trouble on your servant? Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you, that you put the burden of all of these people on me? I mean, can you imagine talking to God that way? Why have you done this to me? He goes on, he says, did I conceive of all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries a little infant to the land that you promised on oath to their ancestors? Moses is calling God out here. And he sums it up. He says, I cannot carry all of these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. But he doesn't stop there. He's so upset. He says, if this is how you are going to treat me, God, if this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes. And do not let me face my own ruin. What in the world is going on? Like, what in the world? How has Moses come to this place of deep distress? Well, that's what we're looking at. And you have to back up a couple verses to even begin to understand why everybody's crying to begin with. So we're going to back up a couple verses in Numbers chapter 11. And this is what it says. This is in, verses 4 through 6. It says, the rabble. Who knows what a rabble is? Nobody. A rabble is like a mob. It's like an angry mob. Okay, it's like a bunch of people who are like rioting, which you get that with the wailing, right? But it says the rabble with them began to crave other food, right? They were just eating the same thing all the time. They began to crave other food. I'm sure you've never, felt that way before. Like, I just want something different than Chipotle or different than Longhorn. Like, they're wanting something else. The rabble began to crave other food. And again, this isn't the first time. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. What babies? If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Now, this is where we learn how delusional they are. We remember the fish. You remember the fish you ate in Egypt at no cost? No cost, really? All that labor and building all those things and like working overtime and not seeing your family ever and being like whipped on the back, but then you got to come home to like some fish? Like, what's the deal with that? We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, and yet they keep going. And the cucumbers. We love those cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but now we've lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna, this bread that descends from heaven every single day for us to eat. We never see anything but bread from God. What in the world? What's your problem? And that's actually part of the mystery of this story, is because you're just wondering, like, Moses, like, how are you getting to a place where you're just like flipping out on God, and at the same time you're like, Moses, I understand everybody's crying, but like, just tell them to suck it up, man. Just eat the bread and keep moving, right? But this wasn't the first time that Moses heard this, and that's part of the mystery as well. It wasn't the first time that they had been complaining about food. In fact, that's pretty much all they ever did was complain. And it usually involved food. So we back up to Exodus. We're backing up a couple books, but really not that long ago. And we back up and there's a similar type complaint. This is in Exodus chapter 16. It says, the Israelites said to them, if only, remember that? It just starts with, if only. If we just had this, everything would be perfect. You know, we just had this, everything would be fine. We just keep moving on to the land we're going. But you just keep ruining it, just making us eat all this bread. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Now take a minute to soak that in. Okay, these are people who had left Egypt after 400 years of slavery. They had seen God perform all of these different plagues to persuade Pharaoh to let them go. And the last plague, you remember what the last plague was? God said, I want you to go into your house. I want you to take some blood. I want you to take this blood of the lamb. I want you to wipe it over your doorframe. If you do that, if you stay in your house, you're going to be safe. But if you don't do that, your firstborn of every family, whether a person or a livestock, is going to die. And here they're saying, if only we had just not put the blood on the doorframe and we had just died there. Can you imagine that? And here's their reason. Because there we sat around pots of meat. We had all the meat we could eat. Wish we had died back there because at least we would have been eating when we did it. And we ate all the food we wanted. And Moses, you brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly. You're like, you big babies. But that's probably the thing that just really confuses me, because here we have Moses who's ready to die. He's ready to give up. And it's because the people are complaining about meat. And it wasn't the first time. And so we ask the question, why does Moses have such a breakdown? Okay, now this is where we need to back up and understand what happened to lead us to this point. Okay? And so we're going to back up and we're going to look at the story surrounding God's covenant with the people through Moses. And what we'll find is that Moses, he really does it all. He orchestrates the whole thing. The first thing that he does is that he acts as a matchmaker between God and the people. Remember, he didn't really want to go in the first place when God said, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to, tell Pharaoh, let my people go, and then you're going to be their leader and follow them out. And Moses didn't really want to go. But when he's finally persuaded, when God finally persuades him, dude, you need to go. He's like, okay, I'm going. He takes with him 4 promises from God. And these are the 4 promises he takes with him to the Egyptians. And it's almost like when a man loves a woman and he's making these promises to her early on to persuade her, like, I am worthy of a relationship with you. This is what God says. He says, I want you to say to the Israelites, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. That's the first promise. The second one is this. I will free you from being slaves to them. He's courting them with these promises. Man, wouldn't that be great? I will redeem you with an outstretched arm with a mighty axe of judgment. That's the third promise. And then the fourth one is this. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Now, I've looked into this particular promise because it's like, what does take you as my own people mean? Is it kind of just like a shepherd taking a new flock? Well, it's similar, but it's actually more than that. And this word take is actually more similar to acquire, like acquiring a wife, like actually reaching out and saying, hey, would you be interested in, marrying me? And so it goes beyond just the simple, I'm going to be your God, and you're going to follow me and worship me, and as long as you do that, we're going to get along fine. It's more than that. It's actually much more relational. It's very similar to the song we just sang before that. And so then Moses goes on because the people respond. He takes the people out of Egypt, and he begins planning this wedding ceremony for them. And it's pretty fascinating, this wedding ceremony. We often think about this as being just a bunch of laws that God give the people. But I have some Jewish friends, and they tell me that even today, they dance. They dance, like physically today, they dance whenever there's a reading of the 10 Commandments. And so what's actually happening in this period is Moses is going to the people, and he's going back before God, and he's saying, hey, will you do this? If you do this, then you're going to be God's treasured possession. Oh, you'll do that? Okay, they said yes. It's almost like that middle school, like in between. Do you like him? Hey, yeah, I like you. Okay, you like him. He's like kind of going back and forth, right? And he's just playing this role of a matchmaker, and he's starting to plan this wedding ceremony and everything. And God, gives them these 10 Commandments. And there's 2 copies of the 10 Commandments. And it's actually, I always picture there's like 5 5 of the commandments on one side and 5 on the other. But what I've learned is actually all 10 are on each one. One copy for the people, one copy for God. You hold up your end of the deal, I'll hold up my end of the deal. We're going to enjoy a beautiful relationship. But then you remember the trouble comes, and the people very quickly forget the promise that they had made. They forget Moses, and they're like, dude, he's been gone for like 40 days. Where is that guy? What's his name anyway? Hey, make us a golden calf, Aaron. We want something tangible, right? And they go through this whole golden calf. You've heard that a million times. But near the end of that, Moses and God are up on the mountain. And when the Lord finishes speaking to Moses, this is Exodus chapter 31, he finishes speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai. He gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant, the tablets of the stone, inscribed by the finger of God. So God actually wrote this with his own finger. Now, I can't imagine what that would look like. Like, what does God's handwriting look like? But it's pretty incredible. But unfortunately, Moses doesn't even make it down with that, and no one will ever know what it looked like because he smashes him when he sees this golden calf. And then Moses is now needing to provide marriage counseling. Now, premarital counseling is a good thing. When you grow up a little bit more and you want to get married, I would strongly encourage that you get some premarital counseling. Very important. But marriage counseling, where there's like a lot of dysfunction early on in the relationship, it's probably not a good sign. And Moses is now having to counsel not only the people, he's having to counsel God. Because God is extremely upset. You probably remember this. God's extremely upset, and who wouldn't be? You know, you find out that your boyfriend or your girlfriend has another boyfriend or girlfriend on the side that you didn't know about. Man, that doesn't sit really well with anybody, does it? That's exactly what this was like. So God's upset, and he decides, I'm going to start completely over. Moses, you're my guy. You're my new Abraham. And we're going to start completely over, and you're going to be the guy. All of these Israelites, I'm going to kill them. And Moses says, whoa, wait a minute. We've come too far, God. We've come too far. God's not really having it, but he's like, we've come too far. In fact, I'm begging you, please forgive their sin. But if not, then I just want you to blot me out of the book you've written. Not, I just want you to kill me. That's what he says later. I want you to take me out of the book of spending eternity with you in heaven. I don't want to be there if you're going to respond this way and destroy the people. In fact, Moses actually, he comes back down and he takes his own personal tent and he moves it outside of the camp. And he's basically signaling to God. This is Exodus chapter 33. He's signaling to God, if you're going to send us on without you, I'm not going. I'm going to stay here in this desert. I'm going to sit here right in my little tent by myself. I'm not going anywhere without you. In fact, I'm moving out so the people understand it's not me they're making a partnership with. It's not me that they're getting married to. It's you. So you need to come down and dwell and live among us. And it's this back and forth. Is God going to show up? Is God going to show up? And they actually spend about a year, maybe a little bit more, building this. It's called the tabernacle. You've probably heard that word before, but it's basically going to be this house that God and his people are going to live in together. It's going to be their honeymoon suite that they're going to take with them wherever they go. And the people are building this not knowing whether God's going to show up or not. And thankfully, he does show up. And so Moses now officiates the wedding. And what happens is Moses and Aaron, they go into the tabernacle that they've just finished. And the people don't yet know if he's going to show up. And Moses and Aaron go into the tent. And then they come back out of the tent. They set up this altar. They put food on it. And it seems a little bit primitive, but essentially it was pretty similar to what the custom of the day would have been looking like. That a wife, a prospective wife, would have prepared a meal for a husband. And if the husband chose to come and eat the meal, then game on. They're getting married. This is going to be great. And so the people have prepared this house. They've prepared this table. They've prepared a table before God. And then it says this. It says that when all the people saw it was this fire that comes out and consumes the food, they shouted for joy and they fell face down because they knew God is with us. He's going with us. And we're going to get married. Okay, now fast forward just a little bit, maybe 2-3 months. And we're back at this. If only we had meat to eat. And this is what Moses realizes, is that the people despite this relationship that they had made with God, despite this marriage contract that they had set up with Him, they hadn't really changed. And Moses, he's burned out. And he doesn't know what to do. Before this covenant, they're complaining about not having enough meat. And then you'd expect, after all of that, after all of the, going back and forth, and all of the mediating, and all of the, but God, don't do this, and the people, you gotta listen up, you gotta figure this out. But God, they're really good. They can figure it out. He goes back and forth and back and forth. He's burned out. And he realizes that they haven't really changed. And so this is when we begin to understand the point of the story. God comes to Moses. He says, Moses, I want you to bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders, meaning they've taken responsibility for themselves, for their relationships in their household, and in the community. They've taken responsibility. They're officials among the people. And have them come to the tent of meeting where we normally meet. Have them come here that they can stand there with you. And I will take some of the power of the Spirit that's on you and put it on them. I will take some of the power of the Spirit and put it on them. They will then share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone. This is the principle. And you know what? You don't actually have to wait for God to come and tell you this. This is the principle. Listen. Responsible leaders share leadership responsibility. Responsible leaders share leadership responsibility. They don't try to hoard it. They don't try to take it all the time, because you know what? If you choose to take responsibility for yourself, you owe yourself to be a leader for yourself. We call it self-leadership sometimes. You owe that to yourself to lead yourself well. If you choose to take responsibility for your brother, your sister, your friends, you're a leader. And if you do that, there's going to be times when it's just easier to do it yourself. Have you ever felt that? You ever worked in a group of people or been working on a project and you're like, oh my goodness, they're not paying attention. They're not doing anything. It's just, let me just have it. Let me just have it. I'll just do it. I'll just do it myself. In college, that's how I felt sometimes. I just thought, nobody really cares as much as I do about this. I'm just going to take this on. If they get credit for it, that's fine. I'm not really down with that. I'm going to end up doing it, but I'm going to make sure it's good, because it's just sometimes easier to just do it yourself. It's also sometimes where you do just want to get all the credit. And I've felt that before. You ever felt that ego come out in you and you're like, man, now people are taking credit for my work. I want to do it myself, but I actually just want all the credit. If they're just going to just bum around, not do anything, I'd really just rather all the credit. But there's going to be times when you choose to be a leader when you're going to have to fight your own ego in taking responsibility for yourself and for others. There's going to be times where you don't really want to change, where you realize, and this is actually where Moses was, he was having to exercise a new kind of responsibility. Before the covenant, before this marriage contract with the people, Moses pretty much just had to show up and just provide this technical kind of leadership. God said do this, so he did it. And God said do that, and so he did it. And everything just kind of worked out really well. But after the covenant, when the people hadn't really changed, Moses is scratching his head, and he's burned out, and he's wondering, what am I supposed to do? In fact, through the rest of the book of Numbers, you just don't see that same confidence that we saw, because now Moses is having to exercise some adaptive leadership. Before it was this technical leadership. Show up, do this. Here's the playbook, do this. Afterwards, it's, but now they're growing up and I don't really know what to do with that. And God's not just telling them, now do this, now do that, now do this. And so Moses is having to share leadership responsibility. Well, the last one, that sometimes, there'll be times when you actually won't know who to turn to for help. These top three are just like your ego. And you're going to fight your ego for the rest of your life, so you may as well start getting used to it. But this bottom one is, there's going to be times where you just won't know who to turn to for help. And it's curious to me that God, and really the people themselves, the last time they had complained about not having enough food, God sent them manna. This next time they start complaining about food, why didn't they just say, hey God, can we have some meat? It was like they didn't even know who to turn to for help. And Moses is like ready to die. And you're like, dude, ask God for some meat. He wants to give it to you. You just set up this marriage contract. No good husband withholds good gifts from his wife. Ask him. And so I want to give you a couple little things to look for, because it seems to be a pretty common problem that we don't know who to turn to for help. Here's who you should turn to for help. Someone who's wise, someone who's trustworthy, and someone who's resourceful. Now, to me, that kind of sounds like God. Someone who's wise, trustworthy, and resourceful. It also sounds like some elders that I know. Some elders here at Grace Chapel, some people who are soon to be elders. In fact, I would actually encourage you, just a little side note, a little commercial here for you. We're in the process of nominating some new elders at Grace Chapel to carry the burden, carry the responsibility of the people. And so it's actually up to you too to look around and say, who are the people that are wise and trustworthy and resourceful? And we should probably get them to help carry the load, right? And so I would encourage you to do that. But I want you to remember this. When you don't know who to turn to, I want you to pick out someone who's wise, who's trustworthy, and resourceful. Now, you understand wise, and I hope you understand trustworthy. But resourceful means they actually either have the resources themselves to help you with your problem, or they know someone who can. And I remember in high school sometimes sharing some of my problems with people who were in high school with me. Well, they didn't really have the resources to help me with my problems. And so you have to turn, and that's what God's saying to Moses. Look around this community and find some people who have taken responsibility, who are leaders. Share it with them. Because responsible leaders share leadership responsibility. And this is really key. And you may not feel like a leader, but if you've taken responsibility, you are a leader for yourself, for other people, and for your whole community. And if you want to actually get real serious about it, Jesus actually goes on and I'll to explain this a little bit more. And I want to come back to the verse that we talked about last time, because I want it to feel really personal to you, because Jesus seemed to think it was. He says this: from everyone who's been given much, much will be demanded. You've been given much. And from the one who's been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. You've been entrusted with much. You've been given much. You've been entrusted with much. So why not share it? Why not share what you've been given? Because this is what he says: a lot's going to be demanded from you. You've been entrusted with much. Why not share it? Because so much is going to be asked of you. What Jesus is saying is, you're responsible. I've given you a lot, so you're responsible. And a lot's going to be asked of you. And it's going to create some anxiety within you when you start to learn that you've been given much and much is going to be demanded, and you've been entrusted with much and much is going to be asked. You know how to dissipate that anxiety? You share it. So I ask you this question. Who do I need to share responsibility with? This is a question for you. Who do I need to share responsibility with? Who is wise among you? Who is trustworthy? Who is resourceful? Ask yourself that question, and you can begin to feel the relief. You can begin to actually not harbor all that anxiety that's within you of feeling responsible for so much. You can share that with other people, and man, you're going to feel so much better. Lord, I thank you for this group of people. I thank you for how much you have entrusted them. I thank you for how much you have given them. What that tells me is that you've entrusted them because you trust them. And with all of that trust comes this responsibility to live up to the skills and the abilities and the talents and the gifts that you've given them. And so I pray that they will begin to recognize those within themselves, and they'll begin to recognize those within each other. They'll begin to encourage each other, and they won't harbor all that leadership and feel like I have to do it by myself, or I don't want others to get the credit. And they will actually begin to share their responsibility with others. I thank you for Jesus and the way that he actually shared responsibility, because that's led to me being able to be part of this mission, to being a partner, to spread your goodness throughout the world. And I thank you for trusting that with me. I thank you for trusting that with others as well. And it's in the precious name of Jesus that we pray. Amen.